Hi everyone, it's John. It seems like it has been a while since I've actually made a book review, which is all I used to do on this channel for a long time. I've got asked to do a few other things lately, and I've had a lot of fun doing them. But I did want to do a book review. I think that's where this channel is probably mostly rooted. So I haven't done a review of a philosophy book in quite a while. Probably maybe one over the past year or so. The book I want to talk about today is this one, The Open Society and Its Enemies by Karl Popper. As I will say in the review, I am only talking about Volume 1 in this video. Volume 1 is dedicated pretty much solely to Plato, and more specifically, pretty much solely to Plato's Republic. There, he pops in and out of other dialogues and takes some source material from them, but he is pretty much talking about the Republic here. And this is one of the 20th century classics of political philosophy, in a century that really didn't have too many classics of political. Usually when you think about political philosophy, you think about past centuries. This is certainly one that written in the 1940s still is relatively well known. I don't know about how well read, but that's what I want to talk about today. The edition that I have comes from Princeton University Press. Yeah, it's hard to see there, but it says Princeton. And it comes in 2 volumes. I will be talking about Volume 2 at a later date, hopefully within a few months. But today is just Volume 1. The Open Society and Its Enemies opens, or I would say ranks, as one of the greatest and most influential works of political philosophy in the 20th century. Published right as Italy, Germany, and Russia were learning the lessons of what Popper will go on in this book to call a closed society. Most people today remember Popper for philosophical work of a very different kind, mostly in and around what we would call the philosophy of science. Today, Popper remains best known for his assertion that scientific theories should be falsifiable, that is, they should be able to be proven wrong by certain empirical observations, or else they are not properly scientific. That, however, has nothing to do with this book. That is, however, where we do get the term Popperian falsification from, in case anyone happens to be interested in the philosophy of science like I am. Okay. So, in this book, Popper tries to take the same principles that he utilizes to talk about scientific methodology and the process of induction, and he kind of applies them to human behavior. This first volume is devoted, like I said, almost entirely to Plato, and especially Plato's conception of what Popper calls historicism, and why he thinks historicism is so dangerous. Then it moves into an extended attack on Plato's political philosophy as found in the Republic, which is a text that lays out in detail one of the first fully enunciated political philosophies we have from the ancient world. Historicism, which Popper wants to invalidate in all of its forms, is the idea that, like scientific laws, there are historical and social laws that we can discern which govern the behavior of people, governments, and societies. Plato spends part of the Republic trying to show that the unchanging nature of the state is what allows for political philosophy. Popper makes the clear and convincing argument that, more than anything else, the thing that most threatens Plato's ability to create the perfect society is that old Heraclitean bugbear, change. Plato can never really reconcile himself to the fact that the world changes around him. Plato sees change as the biggest threat to the state apparatus. As long as he can keep the guardians in line, the guardians being the people who are responsible for maintaining the state, the republic, as long as he can keep that guardian line pure, then the laws will never change, because the guardians will never be corrupted. And because human nature and the Platonic forms never change, at least according to Plato, Plato can successfully claim that he has unlocked the key to constructing the perfect society. What then is an open or a closed society? Well, to give a short answer, the open society looks something very much like a liberal democracy, and the values that we usually associate with that form of government. The slightly more Popperian answer would be that an open society is one in which institutions allow for the pragmatic, piecemeal redress of social and cultural problems, with the key words here being pragmatic and piecemeal. The closed society is more than one that just lacks the elements of democracy and liberalism. It lacks them because it attempts to impose a totalitarian vision of what human society should look like upon it. So an open society is one that is free to sort of talk to itself, gather up ideas, implement those ideas which it thinks will make the society better. It's a very bottom-up idea of society. A closed society being a top-down, authoritarian, despotic idea of this is how society is going to be, and that's how I'm going to make it. And it will conform to my will. So it's sort of a sharp duality, but it makes sense as a sort of heuristic to think about. For Popper, this totalitarianism usually comes in the form of either historicism, which I explained earlier, or utopianism. Instead of slowly, rationally fixing the problems of society as they arise, as we would in an open society, the closed society will put forward a timeless, unchanging dictum, which must always be respected and at all costs. So, for example, Marxist historicism, of course, claims that the superstructure of society and culture always rests upon a particular economic base. Plato's historicism involves preserving the present function and composition of the state at all costs, no matter what it might mean for the people in society. So, what's the problem with historicism? Why are Marx and Plato so wrong to operate with these guiding assumptions in mind? Well, going back to Popperian scientific methodology, they are completely unfalsifiable. That the highest good is the state, as Plato would say, or that a particular economic base always causes a certain kind of cultural superstructure, as Marx would say, are statements that one might subscribe to. You may very well believe them, but one can never illustrate them to be wrong. When someone attempts to rectify social ills through legislation, for example, they're written with these unfalsifiable assertions in mind, and what results is dogmatic social engineering instead of that, like I said, that pragmatic, piecemeal, slow progress that we're forced to make by virtue of being creatures who are prone to mistakes. When you know that you have the answer to human nature, as Plato and Marx would have claimed that they did, your answers to social problems tend to be more circumscribed, more narrow, more extreme. Protect the guardians at all costs. Separate children from their parents at birth and raise them in a communitarian setting. Again, that's from Plato. Censure all the mimetic arts. Again, Plato. Foment a proletarian revolution. That one's obviously from Marx. Writ large, this part of the text is largely about the limits of human reason and our frequent unwillingness to accept those limits. Human understanding of reality is always, like I said earlier, wholly circumscribed, partial, and fragmented. To make things even worse, we often find ourselves, for reasons of intellectual laziness or political propaganda, or simply the failure of human imagination, find ourselves imagining that we have found the answer to all human problems in capital letters. It is when this happens that we think that we have found that answer, according to Popper, that slow, small steps of social progress give way to the wayward pursuit of credulous dogmatism. Whether or not you agree with its conclusions, there is a lot to make The Open Society and Its Enemies a very admirable book. It was written at a time in history when much of the Anglophone philosophical world was a lot more interested in writing about the epistemic foundations of mathematics than addressing real-world concerns. Anything that couldn't be put under a logical microscope was seen as suspect, including ethics or political philosophy. Ironically, it was Popper's compatriot, Ludwig Wittgenstein, who was largely responsible for philosophy's dismissive attitudes towards subjects like political philosophy and ethics. But rarely has a philosopher like Popper ever so keenly and, I think, intelligently brought their own previous body of work to bear on contemporaneous world problems, let alone have that work become an indispensable classic in its field. And just again to reiterate, a review of Popper's second volume, which is called The High Tide of Prophecy, Hegel, Marx, and the Aftermath, is forthcoming. I don't know when I will get it out, but it will be up on the channel in due time. Please feel free to leave comments, thoughts, or opinions about Volume 1 of Karl Popper's The Open Society and Its Enemies. I will see you hopefully next week.